And I'm just going to start by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and I'll just start with on my left, Julie.
So, my name is Julie, and I'm 21 years old. I go to Western Sydney University, and I'm studying the Bachelor of Humanitarian Development Studies, and I'm in my third year.
Hello, my name is Claire. I am also 21. I also go to Western Sydney University. I'm my third year and I study a Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Law.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Tisdell. I'm not a student. Well, I'm primarily an academic. I'm from the University of New South Wales. So for those people who are international, New South Wales is the state that we're in at the moment and former colony. And it's a large university. And my background is maths, and I'm interested in education, digital learning, these sorts of things.
Fantastic. And Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm a mentor and a subject specialist at Studiosity, and I live in Dunedin, New Zealand, where I'm calling in from. And yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And what I want to say just at the outset here is this is going to be a very informal conversation about the student experience, and we are very fortunate to have Julie and Claire here. It's really, I think, critical to give students, center stage. And granted, there are only 2 of them here, and there's a lot of us, and we're probably going to want to pepper them with lots of questions. And if there were 50 more students, we could probably make this whole today and tomorrow just about them, and that would probably maybe even be the best thing we could do. But in the absence of 48 more students, you guys are going to be a little bit the center of attention, which is great. And I'm going to ask people to feel free to ask questions. I know we set aside sort of 10 minutes at the end, but my feeling these panels work best if they're as interactive as possible. And especially as we're sort of heading into the doldrums of the afternoon, this is a really good time to try and get people to be engaged. But I'll try and keep the conversation moving along. And if Jack and Dunedin has something really important to say and I'm not looking at him, just let me know so that we can make sure that that you get your thoughts included as well, Jack. So, and thank you for joining us. It's really, really great to have you. Yeah, so we might just start with some of the challenges, stress, the pressures of uni life, and maybe just start with you, Julie, since you're closest to me. Just tell us about any academic challenges you've faced over the last 3 years and what that's been like.
Okay, cool. So personally, my challenges involved balancing work and studies. So I do, study full time, and I also work to, support my family and my mum and stuff like that. So it's always been balancing full-time work and studies. And so it pretty much involves me using my time wisely, having a planner, being organized, and just staying on top of things and just using the supports that we do have at the university, and just trying to get through and progress through my course.
Fantastic. Yeah. Claire?
Yeah, definitely agree with Julie. Work and study is quite hard. Especially I think I major in English and I also study law. So readings are a thing that has filled my life. So I found like different ways to try and get through a lot of them. Sometimes I can have like 300 pages a week and stuff like that. So forming friendships on campus. Another thing I found, especially in being in first year, is that you transition straight out of high school and you're thrown into a independent sort of study, and it's very self-motivating. So it's very hard, I found, to push myself. But I think there's a few like mechanisms that universities do really well. Things like making sure that you have weekly quizzes, so you're making sure you're doing the readings, or that they have things like mates at Western Sydney where you actually get to speak to mentors and they help you and give you tips. And that's just helped me through a lot of the challenges that I faced. Yeah.
And Jack, do you want to sort of share anything about the stresses that Julie and Claire have been talking about, sort of the stresses that you might see students exhibiting when they log into the online classroom? I should make it clear too that Jack specializes in our Connect Live service, so he's doing real-time one-to-one interactions with students.
Yes, so I often don't know the details of the stress students facing unless they're very open with that. But what's interesting to me in terms of the stress people face is students, for example, older students or students whose English isn't their first language. These students come along with very specific stresses, and the way you respond is quite interesting. a distant student, distance students is another one which I kind of associate with doing my work from distance. But the the thing with the stress these students are facing is quite often the student knows their content but has no confidence. Especially if an older student hasn't studied for 20 years, they log in, they show me their first essay they've written in 20 years. And it's flawed, but they're also a very skillful writer. And so I've got a role in showing them what to do best, but also really and saying, you clearly know what you're doing. I find that quite interesting.
Thank you. Yeah. And Chris, do you want to share some thoughts about what universities, or at least know?
Yes, I was saying no to the microphone.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm okay without it.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, yeah, what were you saying?
Just some things, at least maybe that UNSW anyway, from your perspective, is doing to try and help students to deal with some of this stress and work-life balance and all that.
Yeah, so I mean, as Julia and Claire said, it's a challenge for everyone, and I think it's there's lots of different parts to a challenge. So you mentioned academic challenges, keeping on top of workload. There are also mental health and well-being challenges. There's also concerns around actually feeling like you're part of a community at university, like you belong, and they're just some. So I think universities are trying to target this in lots of different ways. Could we be doing more? Of course we could be doing more. Many institutions have some sort of counselling service that students can go to. How effective is that? Could we be doing a better job? Of course. Is there pressures on balancing work with academic study and assessment? Of course there is. So, could we be doing more? Yes, we are doing some things. Help centres, academic help centres, counselling centres, mentoring communities, education about things like contract justice. So there's a range.
Yeah. And from your perspective, Julie, what are some of the things that WSU has been providing to you that have made a difference over the 3 years? And congratulations on getting to third year. And it seems like you're very close to graduating, which is awesome. Yeah.
That's a good question. So the university does have like a lot of support, and even with the support, it's not just about study support. So you've got, general support, like Jack mentioned, you've got counselling, you've got disability services, you've got student welfare. But in terms of me personally, I use the study support the most, especially Studiosity, just because I do work and I don't always have time to read over my draft 3 or 4 times. So usually, I do submit that to Studiosity. I go to work, I come back, read the feedbacks, go through that and make those changes. Just having that support, and with Studiosity as well, it being online and that flexibility helps. I have submitted assignment to like 3 a.m. in the morning, and within less than 3 or 4 hours, I get a response back. So just that flexibility, it's completely online, it's free of charge. It's at your fingertips, and so that's pretty much like the only service I actually use at the university in regards to study support, just because of the flexibility. I don't have time to be on campus at like this time and so forth. So, yeah.
But you've also, I gather you've also been sort of paying it forward with I guess you're working or volunteer in the Transition Success Program. Can you tell folks a little bit about that, how that works?
Yep. So I work in Transition Success, and with that, we pretty much do different campaigns, but we focus on commencing and continuing students. So, for example, if a student is starting university, we give them a welcome call a few weeks in, just to see how they're going, just to see if they have any questions and any concerns and so forth. And the other campaigns that we do, which is very important as well, is, for example, if a student is repeating, is enrolled into a repeated units. So we call them to say, what you did last semester and what you could be doing this semester that could make a difference. And based on the response, we withdraw the academic penalty. So if it was out of their control, we talk about, that form being available. And if it's just, general information and, balancing work and study, we talk about, the services like Studiosity Pass and the library Study Smart. And so pretty much just welcoming them, seeing how they're going, seeing if they require any assistance, and just pretty much talking about services and how they can get support and referring them to the best point of contact.
Fantastic. Claire, did you like to add something there, please?
So I'm kind of a stress head, so I use a lot of services. So first year for me, I used our on-campus Study Smart. So that's where you get to talk to a lecturer or a tutor, and they go through your work with you and they help you with any questions. So for me, it was finding the structure that each unit actually wanted for you, and I found it super helpful because it's just like an ease of mind. Again, also why I use Studiosity is because I use the Connect Live. I like asking a lot of questions just so I can get that clarification, just so it's like puts my mind at ease. Another thing that I've used and I found super useful, so much so that I ended up working for it, is PASS. So PASS, there's online and there's face-to-face PASS classes. And I found in first year it was one of the best things that I went to, because I had a student who had done the subject, who I got to speak to, who I got to ask questions about, is this the sort of structure I should be going for? And I found that it just was super helpful. So much so that I love doing it. I ended up being a PASS facilitator for a year at my university, and I did online and also face-to-face. And I just found that it's so interesting to see what students are struggling with, and that like being a PASS facilitator, I could also say, you know, there's also this service on campus, or there is Studiosity that you can use. And I found that was just, yeah, super good. I'm so happy that I can use all these services.
And did you find that the students you were talking to about these things, and both of you, I guess, Julie, in the Transition Success Program as well, that they had much awareness necessarily, or were you simply reminding them, or were they sort of often surprised?
So when I was doing PASS, some students didn't know. So back when it was called Your Tutor, they didn't know how to access it. So I would literally in my class be like, okay, so this is the views, this is where it is, and this is how you access it. Because I'm a lot of tutorial lecturers, they'll tell you about the services available, but not necessarily show you what they do. So I found that like it was important in PASS. I like to be like, I use it too. I'm a PASS facilitator, but I think it's just super helpful. So it's not just for if you think that you're super struggling, am I going to get anything out of this if I sort of know that I'm on track? I think it's like for all students.
And hey, Jack, coming back, I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about your role at Studiosity and how that works, both as a Connect Live specialist, but also as a mentor, which is, I think, a role that probably not many people in the audience here would have much awareness of. That'd be great.
Sure. So starting out, I joined Studiosity in 2014, so I've been working here for quite a long time as a specialist, doing a range of subjects: maths, physics, English. So that's sort of been my job for a few years now. But having become one of the more experienced specialists, a year or two ago, probably about 18 months ago, I was asked to become a mentor, and that's been a really interesting process, because now I'm behind the scenes a little. I'm involved with reviewing the work other people are doing. We already have a chat which I'd already contributed to. Every time we are providing live help to students like you two there, we're also talking to each other in a chat behind the scenes. So if someone's got trouble, a problem they don't know how to resolve, we can give each other a bit of help. And being a mentor has built on that, but doing more behind the scenes as well as that live stuff. So looking at our specialist sessions, saying, you've done this right, you've done this well, you know, standard stuff you'd expect a mentor to be doing, but it's a combination of emergency, something went wrong, we need to resolve this right now, as well as taking a longer term view. How's your work going? These are the things you have to improve on in the long term. Was there anything else? Yeah, and clearly we have to focus on, when there's new specialists, they'll always have a few things to work on. So we focus a lot on new specialists, or specialists that are having a few difficulties, because they're happy.
Yeah. So there is just so people understand, there's a whole framework that we use for these Connect Live sessions to make sure that this is really all about providing help and not answers, and everyone is trained on that, but then we have people like Jack and a whole group of other mentors as well who are constantly on a continuous basis reviewing and providing feedback to the specialists to make sure that we're giving a really consistent experience every time a student logs in, and that they're learning so that they don't end up in Tracy's study. So just coming back to you, Julie, and by the way, feel free to interrupt with questions, as I said. I have not been watching enough, so if someone really has a question, you can sing out, please. But Julie, yeah, well, tell us about what that sort of, the feedback that you have been getting has been like, and maybe what sort of effect it may have had, because you've been using it for quite a long time. So, I mean, there's obviously something that you're experiencing that makes you want to come back and use it, and there's some sort of continuous improvement for you as well. Can you just share a little bit about that?
Yep. So as I mentioned, it's the only service that I use at the university, and like just when you go to like uni and stuff, tutors will be like, oh, get your family or your friends to read over your work and so forth. So I've got a sister and she goes to uni as well, but she has a family of her own. All my friends go to uni as well, and they also work or they work full time. So I don't have that person to always go over my assignment or to read over it and so forth. And even though they recommend, reading out loud to yourself like a few times, I do, but it makes sense in my head because I wrote it. But obviously from someone else's point of view, they can see my errors and so forth. And so that's why, the service is so great because first and foremost, it is online. Someone's going through my assignment, they're reading it. And in terms of like uni work, I can write, I can answer questions. I'm just not the best in terms of structure, in terms of grammar, and in terms of spelling. And that's one thing that I do know that I'm not great at and I could obviously improve. And that's why I use the service. And the great thing about the service is that you're able to tick all those boxes. So it's great that you can, it's not limited. And you're also able to write like a comment, which is like 500 words or characters. And so what I do is I actually write the questions I'm answering, that I'm answering, responding to. So, the specialist or the academic that's reading over my work, they're not just, going through structure and grammar and so forth, but they actually know what I'm talking about. And that's why I use the service. It's flexible, it's free, it's 24 hours, and it's just at your fingertips.
And what she's referring to is during the submission process, you can choose some different areas for the specialist to give feedback, but there is no limit. You can pick all of them or just one or two.
Yeah.
And then there is this area where you can add a comment or
Exactly. And the improvement as well is that you're able to actually select what subject it's for. So it gives you like a drop box and you're able to select what subject, and you're also able to say if it's your first draft or if you're nearly there and so forth. So that way they can kind of assess in terms of where you should be in terms of your assignments and so forth. And I really like that because it just pretty much helps you and helps them understand what you need to be doing better.
Yeah. And have you seen a difference in your marks or your confidence or like anything that you would associate with that?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been using it for 2 years. I use it all the time. I used it last week. So and the great thing is that as I mentioned with grammar and spelling and stuff like that, that's something I struggle with. So like ever since second year, I use it if it's, if my assignment is worth 10%, if it's worth 5%, if it's worth 60%, I always use it. And in terms of my marks, definitely, because I've never had an assignment where my marks are affected in a negative way based on my structure or my spelling and so forth. So that's how it is working. And even personally, when you read your draft and the recommendations, personally I can tell that it sounds better, like that's proper in English and that's academic writing and so forth. So you can tell within yourself that there is an improvement and there is a difference. So yeah, definitely.
And Claire, can you just maybe explain for everyone here, just sort of paint a picture of a typical scenario when you might be studying at home and you, as a self-confessed stress head, needing some help. Like how does that arise, and then what's the resolution look like?
So I use Connect Live a lot. I've used writing feedback a couple of times, but I find that when I talk to someone, I can clearly clarify my points or what particular area I want them to focus on. I find that like being able to converse with someone is a lot more helpful with me, like that give and take. For me, it's a lot of late nights, especially because I work quite a bit and I also work during the day. I find that being able to talk to someone online until like midnight is actually really great for me because it's an easy way for me to study after work instead of being just pushed into having to work during the daytime. So for me, Connect Live, I really love it because I'm able to not only just like get someone to look over my work, but I am able to be taught what I can do in the future. I remember I had this like amazing Connect Live tutor, which was Jonathan. He would teach me. So like I was really bad with my grammar as well. And like I would either use too many commas or would use a semicolon wrong. And so he would say, okay, we'll look at this particular sentence in your work and then now read it out loud. Where do you think the comma should go? And so I would able to like do that myself. And it kind of just gave me tips and techniques for my own study time. So I didn't have to use the service all the time of, this is what you should be doing. This is what you could be doing. And it just would self-improvement a lot that way. I also find that I use the service not only just to like edit things, but I kind of just get stuck because I'm kind of also a perfectionist where I self-edit as I go along and then I just get like stuck. So I find that also when you use Connect Live, you can use like a brainstorm my question or understand my question or spelling and checking and editing. I find that I also use it in the beginning. Like I'm not particularly sure what this question really wants me to focus on. So I think it's this. Is this like a good way to go about it? So I kind of just have that extra person there to be like, yes, Claire, you're on track. It's fine, because I second guess myself quite a bit, but I find that that's been helpful. So now I don't second guess myself so much and I know that I'm on track. As well, I've found that when I do it, I have improved my marks. So I'm normally at like a credit to distinction, but I've managed to get like a couple of high distinctions now because of the service, which I'm really proud of.
And does it help you sleep better? That's what I always speculate. I'm like, it must be helping people sleep better.
Yeah.
Midnight.
Going to bed.
Yeah. Does it?
Yeah. At midnight, I'm like, okay, I can sleep now. It's fine.
Good. And maybe, Jack, maybe you could just help folks understand, because I don't think maybe everyone has quite understanding of sort of what that Connect Live experience is really like, and that's sort of that step-by-step guidance, but that dialogue that you try to create to help the students sort of come to their own understanding. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, I really enjoyed Claire's comments about all these different steps. I recognise a lot of what she was saying from my end, so that's really nice to hear. I see a few student comments, but not quite in this sort of manner. So that's really nice to hear. And in terms of assessing what's great about Connect Live, and I understand Claire's perspective in writing feedback, because I've tried that in the other end and found it quite difficult. Is that there's so much ability to respond to the context of an individual student. Every student has their own needs, and that was the phrase you used, Claire, give and take. I absolutely love that phrase, and I use it all the time when talking to other specialists about how to navigate difficult policies, how to give help, not answers, but still giving something. We can give something back. We can keep things moving. It's really good. So yes, absolutely. It's one size doesn't fit all. In Connect Live, we can respond to every individual student's needs, and it can be quite powerful sometimes.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Connect Live, like we're looking at Jack now, and it was looking Zoom.
So it's all text and whiteboards and file sharing. So there's no audio and no video. So that's yeah, lots of whiteboards, as many as you need. Right, but you can explain it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. The file sharing I love, because especially if it's like the editing point, or I can show them where I'm up to about like if I'm brainstorming something, this is my question, rather than having to type everything in. And then they also can like share it back and be like, okay, so this particular area, spelling wise, Claire, watch your tense, or Claire, grammar please. So different things like that to just help me. Yeah, I find that's really useful.
Yeah, a big part about this, and maybe we can ask Claire and Julie about this. Sorry, Chris, we'll get to you in a minute here. Oh, I'm feeling bad now. But a big part of what we hear from lots of students is that the anonymity of both services is really valuable. That you don't, I mean, yeah, there's this really smart person there helping you or reading your work and giving you feedback, but you don't have to. They don't, you and when you log in, what you see it's Jack C helping you, but you don't know anything else, right? Or you mentioned Jonathan, right? But there's no other connection. It's very confidential. It's very secure. It's very safe. Does that have any resonance for you or not?
I feel like I can ask dumb questions. So like it'll be like I stress a lot, so obviously I'll feel like it's like a bad question to ask, and they're like, no, it's fine. This is a particular thing that you can do. So I like that, being able to do that without them knowing me. But then again, I use the service quite a bit, so sometimes they remember me, but that's fine as well. I quite like that, because Jonathan's like, oh yeah, I remember I read this part. Okay, cool, you've edited that, which is quite good, because I use the service quite a bit if I'm working on one assignment. So they can also see that progression there, which is quite nice. But also, like, yeah, I think it's good to be able to ask the questions that you are not too sure on.
We really enjoy the dumb questions.
Yeah, they love the dumb questions, exactly. Well, and look, Chris, what's your perspective, both just sort of as an academic, and in terms of what this kind of support is all about? Is it I mean, do you see it having some sort of a meaningful impact, you think, potentially for students that are dealing with a lot of the challenges that Julie and Claire have?
Yeah, definitely. So a couple of things. I did run a face-to-face student support centre at UNSW for 5 or 6 years, and that was great in the daytime, and it was open 4 hours a day, right? So one of the big advantages, I think, maybe the students backing up here, is that it might be 9 o'clock at night or something's due, the next day. As universities, it's hard to meet those challenges, because as a lecturer or teacher, I'm not really getting paid or tutor, I'm not getting paid to work those hours. So I think that there is a big impact there. And also, I've done the live connect sessions as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they were great. I mean, as a teacher, I'm pretty skeptical when you see someone else teach. It's probably, and they were great, exactly as you described. Plenty of whiteboards, text, anonymity. I didn't feel silly about asking student questions.
Yeah, which we all have. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. And while we have you here, maybe you could just share a little bit about your role on the Studiosity Academic Advisory Board, and sort of what that's all about, and what you've been able to experience in the last year and a half.
Yeah. So myself, Judith, are you here? Judith Sachs up the back. And a few other people here in Australia have been on the Studiosity Academic Advisory Board for a couple of years. It's been a really great way for me to really explore and interface the relationship between higher education and industry. And so part of our job in that role is to kind of act like critical friends, ensure that we're a first port of call or a sounding board for ideas, and also to look into things like quality. I was talking with Lucy before about a project we did on hiring processes in Studiosity. How do you ensure that you're getting the best people to come and do their best work as tutors? It's really important. So these are the sort of things that we do as a board. You can jump in any time. And it's been a great experience, very impressed.
And we can ask questions like, we can ask things like, have you thought about?
Yes.
And sometimes they have thought, the company has thought about, but other times they said, no, we hadn't thought about that, we'll pursue it. So it is a reciprocal and a respectful exchange. It's not one of expert and client.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh,
Sorry,
can I
is there a
ask
question?
Claire a question?
Excellent. Yes, go ahead.
You talked about being or going to pass maybe and then being a pass facilitator. Can you share with us how you, as Studiosities come in, how you've seen they're bringing like complementary learning to the space for students, or if students see them differently, or has it affected class or anything like that?
I think because PASS is quite heavily promoted at the university, so when I was a PASS facilitator, I would go to the first lecture. I found that I would still get heaps of students coming up. I think as well because PASS is, you can have a face-to-face session with someone and they can directly answer your question, and people kind of like that it's a student as well. So you get that connection with people. So I don't think it particularly has hurt it there. As well as PASS online. I did PASS online for a little bit and I found that that was good, but it would be a set time as well. So everything was quite structured. Whereas I think what Studiosity allows you to do is it's any time you can freely go to it. I think as well, what I would do in my PASS sessions is I would tell people about that service, because I think a lot of students, they only have so much time to ask me a question in an hour PASS class, and I can't look at every student's work and I can't help them always. I can just give them the basic structure when I was doing PASS. So I found it complimentary, because I could say, if you need further help or if you want this particular thing, then this service is available to you, or Study Smart on our campus is available to you. So yeah, I found it very complimentary actually.
Andrew, yeah.
Julie, you said you cut and pasted the question when you submitted your feedback, which, well done for that initiative. But it's not actually a requirement. Did that influence the feedback you got? Like, did you get feedback saying, yes, you're on track, or you follow the task, or you answered the question, or did you just do that to put the advisor in context?
That's a good question. So personally, when I do it to put it, the person that's reading my work in context. But then what I also do is I put in the question and then I look at the marking criteria and I copy all the marking criteria under higher distinction for like clarity and, work layout and so forth, and I put all of that in there. So, they know exactly what I'm answering and what I need to be doing in my work. And so that way, that just helps me personally in my marks as well, because worst come to worst, I get a distinction, not a high distinction, or a credit if we have to stretch it that far. But so that's pretty much why I do that. I actually started doing that towards the end of my second year, because I just used to say like thank you in that box or something, but then I'm like, I could say thank you, but I could also be strategic. So I do both. Definitely for clarity, and also to help that I'm on the right track and to make sure that I'm doing my work to meet the requirement of a high distinction student.
I've got a question. You guys are both so highly motivated. You're like, distinction, high distinction, like you're reaching for the top. That's fantastic. We love you. And please come and be in my class. The question's really for Jack. What we talked earlier today, the quill data was showing sort of lack of engagement. Our data is showing dissatisfaction with the teaching and learning environment. Mm-hmm. How do we reach those students who are not the distinction and HD stress heads, but are the ones who are not even caring if they're thinking, if I get 48, they'll bump me up. It's so disengaged, they're just not there. How do we reach them so they get support?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And
I'm hoping you can answer it.
Well, I do have a couple of answers actually.
Yeah.
And I would say that part of what's happening, and I was gonna save this for tomorrow afternoon, but I'll share a little bit of it right now for those of you who aren't gonna be here tomorrow afternoon. Is I think that part of what's happening is that used to be that we used to think of people as being either introverts or extroverts. I think that the mobile phone has revealed all of us as introverts. I think everyone by nature is an introvert. We all go back to a screen rather than talking to someone face to face. We were all much happier talking and we're all much happier kind of in our own little worlds of sharing pictures. Anytime a conversation gets difficult, we don't want to have this discussion. University's hard and there's not a lot of support offered. And for students, they're either in one of two situations. They've either come from school where there was a lot of support, or they've not come from school and now what are they going to do? This is so it's a difficult situation for all those students who are struggling with it. And that combined with the fact that, and we've exacerbated this with all of this mobile technology, which is both distracting and causing people to be introverted and not engaged and feeling like they can stay at home or not have to get to campus, right? So they're not getting that extra, those sort of face-to-face, those soft interactions that we know can be so valuable. And that may be just because they've got all these commitments like Julie and Claire have, and they're not alone, maybe high achievers, but they're much more typical than atypical, I guess. And you combine that with the widening participation, the international students. Most universities have doubled in size potentially in the last or many years. We have a lot more students who just as capable, but not as well prepared.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of work for universities to be doing more of the kind of outreach and communication and direct work to reach students. I don't think it's so easy. I think it's really, really hard. And, I'll be perfectly honest and say, well, I'm speaking just from the perspective of Studiosity. We invest an enormous amount of time and energy and people helping universities to get the message out to students about what it is that we do and how it complements and supports, doesn't compete, but complements and supports what you're already doing and what you'd like to achieve. But that only works if we're working with receptive people who realize this is what we want to achieve. This is really important. This is going to make a difference. And if Studiosity is getting used, then other things are going to get used more too. It's not a zero-sum game, right? They're going to use the things that we make available, all the tools, right? Now, maybe in some instances, some tools work better than others, but a lot more can be done, I think, to reach students who have been casually enrolled and then maybe all too casually supported.
I agree. That didn't give me the answer though. We want to do that. How do we do it?
Well, from the perspective of Studiosity, work with us. Work with us more closely and talk to your peers and find out what's working at other universities and copy. Copy. Exactly what you don't want them to do in but no one's, right? But but that's exactly what good outreach is all about, or good communication skills are all about, right? It's just, nobody copyrights that. That's meant to be shared. So, and don't be afraid of the word marketing or promotion. You've got 25,000 students on your campus. If you're not marketing to them, they're all going to be disengaged. So you really do need to talk a lot.
I find that the irony of all of that, so I'm Lynn from Torrance and we're a new university, and to be fair in putting a perspective around it, we're a pathways university in the main. And we have a focus on students that is probably the envy of every university because it's front and center from the executive down. It's what we do. And we engage and market on a daily basis to all of our students, and it is still difficult to engage. But the irony is when we implemented Studiosity, our numbers doubled and our minutes doubled every month. And that is without marketing. It's word of mouth. It's a confidence. It's a student helping another student. And we've actually pulled our internal marketing back in case it's our internal marketing might end up with the same result. It's just words blasted, or words, images, videos, whatever you want to choose, blasted at students, and they're going, oh. But Studiosity has actually become a reliable, anonymous go-to. And the numbers are extraordinary for such a small place that we are. I mean, we couldn't be happier. We just put our feet up on the desk.
Well, that's a great story. And I have to say, just from your perspective, and thank you so much, that's a lovely story to hear. And that's actually, I think it's not dissimilar what's happening at UNSW, for example. But one of the things, and I don't know the specifics at Torrance, but Jed will, obviously, and other folks. Making it easy to find these services is really important too. So that, right, that user experience is critical. Everyone's on their phone. That's the most valuable real estate in the world. So you've got your students and you're giving them a learning management system of some sort, and you're expecting them you've condensed this great big campus into a screen that's 4.7 inches or 5.2 inches diagonally. It's pretty tiny. What do you want to tell them there? What do you want them to find? So there's an, you know, gargantuan amount of information there, but what's the best way to engage students? And, you know, all credit to you and making it easy to find and making it, and look, this is something we have invested enormously in, is to make this platform super easy to use once you're in, right? Which is, that's the idea, is that it doesn't take any time and you start to get something out of it. And then the more you put in, the more you'll get out. But it really needs to be very much of a student gives us something, we give them something back right away, right? We don't say, well, come along to the next class and you might find out how it all ends, right? Or this is not, there's no cliffhangers here. We want to make sure students get a resolution so they can sleep at night or get their document back and maybe move up a mark if they can incorporate some of the learnings. That's all part of this as well. You know, university is hard enough if we can make it a little bit, you know, easier to navigate. And I think this technology is key. And it's very easy to think that the tech is just what it is and there's not much we can do about it. But you've got a lot of control over it, and you can give students a great experience with it, or you can give them a kind of mediocre one, in which case they're gonna go right back to all the, you know, Instagram and whatnot. That's a lot nicer to use. And that, to be honest, that's the last point I'd make, is that's the benchmark, right? If you want to know what good user experience is, use Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat. I mean, all that stuff, that's beautifully made. And think about how much money's been invested in that. And we need to compete with that for people's attention. So,
Tracy,
sure, please.
To go back to your question, then correct me if I'm wrong at Torrens. The students who are using Studiosity are not just the motivated ones.
They're absolutely not just the motivated ones. And that's, we have a very strong message around, we've divided engagement so that there is the motivation kind of engagement, and obviously all of this overlaps. But because of where a lot of our students come from, this concept of what I call educational capital, and it's the combination of academic, digital, and information skills that many kids have because of where they've come from, what schools they've gone to, but many of ours don't have that. And it doesn't matter how many different colored lollies you have on the student counter or how much face painting there is in the quad. If they don't have these skills, they will not progress. Just because they have the skills doesn't mean they will progress, but if they don't have them, they won't. So our focus is trying to find smart ways of identifying students as they enter before the first assessment who don't have the skills, and putting something in place, and we've actually used Studiosity to help us do this, so we nab them, and instead of saying you've been nabbed because you're probably at risk, we say, why don't you come to morning tea or pizza lunch and tell us how it's best to communicate to you, and that gives us the connection which gets them through their first assessment with the help of the mainstream Studiosity service. And, you know, it's early days, but I think we're making a dent.
Yes.
Can I ask a question? Sure. It's great to hear about how you're accessing different services and paths, obviously other services that you have available. Do you think there should be a limit to the number of consultations you can have with the Studiosity service? I mean, just in terms of finite ways that universities have finite resources. So if you're looking across and you're saying, okay, we want every student to have this service 4 times, and that's what we can afford. So how would that sit with you?
Okay, first and Claire. So in terms of that, for example, what Claire already mentioned, PARTS, which is peer-assisted study sessions. So that first and foremost is not available for every subject. It's only available for some. And that's also one of the restrictions. But then that's also one of the beauty of it, because those subjects are usually first year subjects or subjects that students usually struggle with. And in terms of Studiosity, because I've been using it for a long time now, when we first had it, there was no limit in terms of the amount of time that you can, submit your work. And as I mentioned, I used the writing feedback. And so there was no such thing. But then it got upgraded and, changes were made, improvement was made. And so there is a limit in terms of hours, and it's monthly and it reschedules every month. And if I'm not mistaken, it's about 400 hours. Minutes, sorry. Hours.
Hours would be good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. 400 minutes. And with that as well, the great thing is when you're actually submitting your work, and what I do is I don't put my reference list because I just add to the word count. So I take that out and I make a note in the comments to say that I'm actually taking my reference list, so that way I can have enough minutes during the month. And so it tells you exactly estimated how many, if you submit this assignment, how many minutes it will take off your monthly 400 minutes. So you know exactly, and you can be strategic with that. So having that limitation is also great. So that way it's accessible to everyone, and it's not being abused or misused by some people, and I could be one of those people. But it's great to know that it is equally spread across, and everyone have the same opportunity to those minutes a month.
So what I find with limits is that due to the nature of university, all of my assessments are like the one time. So sometimes when there is a monthly limit, I'd have to then prioritize which assessment I'd like to get looked over, and then that forces me to go to use other services such as Study Smart, where I get the lecturer to look over a certain assessment. So sometimes I do find that is tricky, that it sort of changed my nature a little bit with how I interact with the tutor. I don't want to be rude, but I also know that each second counts now. So I think sometimes it can be quite hard if you do have a limit, because I could have 3 assessments due in a week, and those assessments are quite large, especially as you approach later years. I find that sometimes that can be tricky, but the way that I use that is I go to other services, or I use a service for a particular thing and then use like PASS to help me with structure, or I'd use Study Smart to have something else looked over that way. Then again, I also do see the benefit of it is that people can be strategic and only focus on the things that need to be focused on. So whether that's like getting rid of reference lists that's unneeded, or whether that is me actually before I go on being like, I want this part looked at, and I want this particular part focused, rather than just a broad overview. So it's changed the way I've engaged with it, because I'll focus my problems rather than just being like, please help me with my structure. I will be, please help me with my structure in this particular body, or does this sentence link into the next sentence? So I think it's changed my way quite a bit, which is good, I think, but also is a little bit frustrating, but you kind of just get accustomed to it.
I think we're close to out of time, and it's afternoon tea time. Any last question that cannot be missed? Why don't we just, please, let's thank Julie and Claire. Thank you so much. And Jack and Dunedin. Thank you so much, Jack, for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. And Professor Chris, thank you so much. Excellent. All right, afternoon tea is outside. Thank you both.